never believed in ghosts. Not really. Sure, I loved horror movies, and I could appreciate a well-told ghost story. But deep down, I always thought they were just that, stories. That was before I moved into the old house on Blackwood Lane. The house was too cheap. Suspiciously cheap. A 4-bedroom Victorian home, abandoned for years, and yet it cost less than a 1-bedroom apartment downtown. But I was a broke college grad, and I needed a place to stay. I moved in the next day. The house smelled of dust and old wood. The furniture was still there, covered in white sheets. I ran my fingers over the wooden staircase, feeling a shiver despite the warmth of the afternoon sun. The silence in the house was thick, pressing against my skin like damp cloth. The first night was uneventful. I unpacked, made myself dinner, and went to bed. The wind howled outside, and the house groaned like an old ship, but nothing else happened. Then, on the 4th night, I noticed it. A door at the end of the hallway. I was sure it hadn't been there before. It was simple, unremarkable, plain wood, no handle, no keyhole. Just there. My stomach twisted in a way I couldn't explain. I tried to ignore it. That night, I had a dream. I was standing in front of the door. My body wasn't my own. It felt lighter, weaker, like I was someone else. From the other side of the door, I heard whispers. Soft, desperate. They weren't speaking words, just sounds like gasps or sobs. Then I heard a knock. I woke up gasping, my heart pounding. My bedroom was silent, but something felt off. The air was thick, heavy, like the house was holding its breath. Then I heard it. A single, slow knock from the other side of that door. I sat up, my skin crawling. It was probably the pipes, I told myself, or maybe I was still half asleep. I pulled the blanket over my head and forced myself to sleep. Night 5. I woke up at 3:13 a.m. The knock came again, 3 slow, deliberate taps. I swallowed hard, willing myself to stay in bed, but my legs had other plans. Before I could stop myself, I was standing in the hallway, facing the door. A terrible, suffocating cold radiated from it. My breath came out in visible puffs. Another knock. I pressed my ear against the wood. Silence. Then a whisper. Help me. The voice was familiar. My own. I stumbled back, my stomach twisting into knots. This was just a dream. It had to be. But when I turned to go back to bed, my feet wouldn't move. The door creaked open. Beyond it, there was no room, no floor, no ceiling, just darkness, endless, suffocating darkness. And in that darkness stood a woman. She was thin, her skin stretched tight over her bones. Her long black hair hung over her face, tangled and dripping. Her arms were covered in bruises and scratches, and her lips were stitched shut. I should have screamed, I should have run, but my body was frozen, trapped in place by a force I couldn't see. She lifted her head. I gasped. She was wearing my clothes. She raised a trembling hand and pointed at me. And suddenly, I was falling. The darkness swallowed me whole. I landed on something hard, the breath knocked out of my lungs. My vision blurred, but when I blinked, I realized I was inside the room. And the woman was outside. She stared at me, tilting her head in curiosity. Then she reached up and ripped the stitches from her lips. Blood ran down her chin as she smiled. "Thank you," she whispered. Then she shut the door. I screamed. I pounded on the wood, clawed at it, but it wouldn't budge. The room was pitch black, suffocating. I couldn't breathe. My fingers scraped against the walls, but there was nothing. No way out. And then I woke up.
Sunlight streamed through the curtains. My heart pounded against my ribs. A nightmare, just a nightmare. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, trying to shake off the lingering fear. Then I froze. The door at the end of the hallway. It was gone. And in the mirror across the room, I saw her. She looked just like me, but she was smiling.